What's up, guys? Blake here, and today I'm wanting to take you down the rabbit hole that I was driven into by trying to learn fighting games. That rabbit hole being the skill of learning to get good at learning. I'll be covering these things through the lens of FPS and fighting games, but they can apply broadly. You can easily apply this knowledge to a skill set of any kind, no matter the field or topic. So, let me provide a little backstory as to how I got obsessed with the skill of acquiring any skill. Story time. In 2019, around 15 or so of my friends held 3 Super Smash Bros. Ultimate tournaments in one of their apartments. I've played Smash since the first one came out on 64, and I've always been among the best in my friend group. I won the first and third tournaments and finished second in the middle of the three after a very close fight. I feel like I was pretty damn good at this game. Fast forward a few months, and one of my oldest friends that I've known since kindergarten opens up a local gaming bar with another friend from back in high school. My friend who'd organized our small tournaments and I sat down to talk with him about hosting Smash tournaments in his new business. We got the details figured out, and a few weeks later we hosted our first big tournament. We had around 45 people enter, which was way more than we expected for our first go at this. So I'm helping run the tournament and trying to play at the same time, and I don't get my warm-up matches in. That's fine. I feel like top dog in my friend group, so I'm not worried about the first random dude that I have to play. I get all the matches in the current bracket going on the setups that we have available and sit down next to this guy who I'd spoken with briefly before. Very nice, unassuming guy. He proceeds to beat the ever-loving hell out of me. I go 0-2 against him and realize very quickly that I'd been a big fish in a small pond. Little did I know, I just went up against one of, if not the best Link players in the state of Georgia. Lucky for me, we had a loser's bracket where I took some rounds and started feeling a little bit better about myself. The whole time, though, knowing that I was going to get wrecked if I went up against that guy again. Which is eventually what happened. I fought my way back to him to eat another 0-2 loss and get put out of the tournament. I'd always played these games purely on instinct and feel. Some of my friends would talk about things like tech, frame data, and tier lists, but they never really interested me. I would usually take rounds against them, though, so I didn't consider these things to be that important. If knowing these things held so much value, then why was it I was winning more often than not? After this defeat, though, I realized that I was missing a lot, and I just learned how bad I was at the game. I decided it was time to start learning the boring stuff, things I'd written off as useless or outclassed by raw skill. Little did I know how big this mountain actually was. Fast forward a few months, and I was now setting up and running these Smash events weekly, and a pecking order had quickly been established in our local scene. If you were there every week, you pretty well knew who you could beat, who would give you a run for your money, and who would just kick your teeth in. I also had realized that because I like playing other games and genres, I would probably never be competitive at the top tier of Smash Ultimate. I was good enough to be ranked in the top 250 in the state. I live in Georgia and we have a notoriously strong Smash scene. As an example, VG Bootcamp, who streams and posts many of the top tournaments nationwide, has a video from around a year ago titled Battle for the South, Georgia vs. the World. So, while I'm proud of the rank I did achieve, I am well aware that there are 200 or so people in my state that can make me look like I don't even know how to play the game. I took away a lot from this experience, from learning how to run local tournaments, to making new friends and getting better at Smash. As it relates to this video though, my biggest takeaway was a drive to learn how to learn. See, while I love Smash, I've played fighting games for all of my life, and Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8 were both on the horizon. Since I couldn't play them quite yet, I picked up their aging but current versions at the time. I also picked up some books on psychology and started looking into the research that others had done on becoming proficient at learning in general. I didn't know it, but I'd gotten over the first hurdle of the Dunning-Kruger effect. In case you're unfamiliar, this effect is someone's perceived ability or knowledge in something versus their actual ability or knowledge. Though this correlation had been noted before, its namesake is derived from the work of David Dunning and Justin Kruger, done in the late 90s. This graph makes this rather self-explanatory, but basically people who know nothing about something are usually aware of this, but people who know a small amount tend to vastly overestimate their knowledge. I like to think of knowledge, either as a whole or in isolation of a single subject, as a sphere. Inside of the sphere is what you know, but like an inflating balloon filling up with air, the surface area increases proportional to the volume. So the more you know, the more of the unknown you're exposed to. With the Dunning-Kruger effect, confidence in a subject does return as you approach mastery or expertise in a subject. This is after you've earned that place by facing the unknown and deciding if it's worth the effort to close the gaps in your own knowledge. Rolling back into my Smash story, I had unknowingly surpassed the first hump of this line in the Dunning-Kruger effect and destroyed my cognitive bias along with my overestimation of my own skills. I'd gotten better, but become much less confident and secure because of it. In one of the many interviews that Navy SEAL Andy Stumpf has done that I happened to catch, he explains to the host of the podcast what makes special operations soldiers so capable. He explains that there are many factors that go into making a capable SEAL, or Green Beret, or Delta operator, etc. But the one thing that he really focuses on is the ability for someone to quickly gain proficiency at any given topic. The DoD, for example, will hire experts to teach a crash course in one of many given skill sets. This could be a competition shooter helping you improve weapons manipulation, professional climbers teaching you how to summit a mountain more efficiently, or less obvious things like having the CIA teach you how to do a Bluetooth dead drop to covertly pass information in a non-permissive environment. Personnel attending this training aren't expected to become full subject matter experts on the entire topic, but just to get good at the basics and add this knowledge as another tool to make them a valuable asset to their team, along with the ability to build off of that knowledge base in the future if needed. I heard this podcast at just the right time, as it's when I was thinking deeply about this very concept. So I dove in to start getting a handle on this process. The first place I looked was a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Daniel covers a large number of topics in this book, but the most applicable takeaway here is what he calls Type 1 and Type 2 thought. Type 1 is simple, intuitive thought that your brain can spontaneously give an answer or solution for, while Type 2 is a slower, more informed cognitive process that requires both attention and effort. A good and simple example is using math. If I ask you what 2 plus 2 is, anyone with a first grade education will immediately think or say 4. But if I ask what's 497 times 373, then you don't tend to generate that answer immediately, unless you're some kind of mathematical savant. That's because the latter shifts your brain into Type 2 thought to solve. Now, if I asked you this exact same questions 5 times a day for 2 weeks, you could get the answer immediately at the end of 2 weeks. Or if I added a slight variation, you could still solve it faster than if I gave a completely different set of numbers because you have an approximation of the solution. Still Type 2 thought, but augmented by Type 1 so it's faster. So using this concept, when you learn something new, you want to take as much of that task or subject as possible and shift it from Type 2 to Type 1 thought. This frees up bandwidth for the cognitive and intentional part of your mind to solve other problems or identify relevant and useful information outside of these smaller tasks. I've followed a guy named Travis Haley for years now, and I've always found him to be an interesting voice in the gun or tactical training community, as he advocates putting down the gun magazine and picking up a psychology book to figure out what you're actually capable of. He posted a video on Facebook one day of him running his 2-2-4-2-2 drill, which is a drill with 3 targets, and as the name implies, you put 2 rounds in the first and second targets, 4 in the third, and then run it back right to left, and finally double tapping in the target that you started on. Your goal is to run it as fast as possible while maintaining accuracy and firing the correct number of shots on each target. When he posted this once, I asked in the comments, what's going through your head when you run this drill? What are you thinking about? I guess it was one of the only questions that he found relevant because he didn't respond to much, but he did answer that one saying, all I'm doing mentally is counting. That was all he had to say for me to understand the value of this drill. He was taking all the complexities of shooting and shifting them from Type 2 to Type 1 thought. Things like knowing his 0, point of aim versus point of impact, good sight picture, trigger control, trigger reset, recoil management, possible reloads, malfunctions, and the biomechanics to drive the gun quickly from one target to the other are all subconscious Type 1 actions for him. This opens his mind up entirely to focus on proper round count. Or, in real combat, he'd be able to think about tactics, angles, friendlies, threats, and maintain good situational awareness instead of worrying about running his gun well. Applying this idea in gaming is easy, as everyone who's played a game for a few hours has done this to some degree. When you get a new game, you have to learn the controls, where they are, and what they do when you first start out. A couple hours in though, and it's automatic. I try to bypass this on PC by setting my controls up the same way across different but similar games. I have an almost identical control layout for all FPS games, at least for the basics and most used actions. This type shift in your mental processing is very noticeable if you've ever played fighting games like Street Fighter or Tekken. Doing a double quarter circle input into a heavy punch to throw a super feels really awkward the first time that you ever try it, But when it's your 10,000th time and you've just conditioned your opponent to jump into you because you threw 2 Hadoukens in a row, it's very automatic and very satisfying. This ability to train things from cognitive effort into intuitive automation is damn near a superpower that we all have access to. The process sounds easy, and at times it can be. Mastering the basics much of the time just comes down to practice and repetition, but as you add complexity, the wheels can come off. So let's shift gears to the other aspect, proficiency and how to build it. The Dreyfus 5-stage model of adult skill acquisition was developed in 1980 by brothers Stuart and Hubert Dreyfus. Stuart was a mathematician and Hubert was a philosopher. They created this model as part of a research project for the US Air Force to better understand how pilots develop proficiency over time. These 5 stages are broken down in a simple and understandable ladder of improvement. Their paper, linked below if you're interested, uses driving and chess as examples. Those are great, but this is a gaming channel, so we're going to use Hunt Showdown and Street Fighter 6. A novice is someone who understands the basic rule set and some of the more obvious tools at their disposal. In Street Fighter, this would be understanding basic things like how the health bar and special meter work, maybe along with knowing basic inputs such as light, medium, and heavy punch or kick, grabs, and drive impact. Essentially just the face and shoulder buttons of the controller and their raw inputs. In Hunt, this would be someone who understands that there's a boss to kill, banish, and a bounty to extract with, along with having a basic grasp of how to aim, move, and shoot, and select gear from their inventory. Novices can sometimes get lucky with something like button mashing or opportunistic luck, but they're usually missing a lot of opportunities that they don't even know to be looking for. The advanced beginner is someone who has internalized the basics and can start applying those in more dynamic situations. In Street Fighter, this is usually when someone starts understanding that they need to block and possibly identifying when their opponent does a move that has a long in animation that can be punished. They might also start landing some basic combos, but will still lack consistency. In Hunt, this would be someone who starts to pick up on sound cues. They might start checking the map to see where gunfire, explosives, or triggered animals are alerting to get a better idea of where other players or teams are at, so they can start making informed decisions based on that information. They'd also start to learn some basic weapon mechanics, but not necessarily apply these correctly under pressure.
Nope, I'm done. Oh, come on, that should have been a kill. That's some post shit. He's around that corner. Ah!
Competence can often be identified as someone who feels overwhelmed as they start to understand the vast number of possibilities and nuances of a given topic. This is where sharp decreases in confidence tend to occur on the Dunning-Kruger graph. This is also where people will either find the emotional fortitude to get better, stop playing, or stop putting in the intentional effort to get better. It's not uncommon at this point to formulate specific strategies to focus on learning and optimize time spent over trying to master an entire topic, or in this case, a game. In Street Fighter, this would likely mean locking down on a specific character as a main, and even possibly narrowing down exactly how you want to play that main. The equivalent in Hunt would be learning to predict other players and finding a niche that you're good at to capitalize on those predictions. More broadly, this could be strategies for avoiding contact and being able to initiate fights when it's optimal for you and suboptimal for your opponent.
Get him. Get him. Got him.
The proficient have typically immersed themselves in a given topic to the point that, from the perspective of beginners and laymen, they appear as an expert. Only others at a similar level will generally identify that they haven't established themselves as an expert. At this point, someone has emotional investment in the topic, and both positive and negative emotions feed back into their drive to get better. If you've ever gotten your ass kicked at a game and instead of assuming the other guy is hacking or playing in a cheap way, you decide that you want to be as good as that guy was, you've just had a negative emotional drive. Conversely, pulling out a clutch play and snatching victory from the jaws of defeat leaves you craving that experience again. The main differentiator between this and the expert is the amount of cognitive effort required to function at this high level. The proficient are still having to decide on how to react to a given situation instead of just intuitively acting. At this level though, they've internalized low to medium level tasks and can likely accomplish them with very minimal mental bandwidth. In Street Fighter, this looks like someone who is likely accomplished in ranked play and with a positive win ratio. They're good at predicting the actions of less experienced players, baiting them with feints, or conditioning desirable responses. They could probably place well or win in some local tournaments, but they'll still get their asses kicked by the very top tier players that are placing well in events like EVO or its equivalent. In Hunt, I think this is a bit harder to narrow down. I think the proficient player in Hunt has a strong grasp of all mechanics. Doing something advanced like intentionally aggroing an immolator to another player and then shooting it, causing it to explode and do a large amount of fire damage while possibly remaining hidden depending on the weapons used, or starting to do advanced and synergistic builds with teammates. Like having one person run a gun with a high rate of fire to pin people behind cover, and a second person run a crossbow with exploding bolts to eliminate that player once they're pinned in a static position. Or even expanding on this, such as one person running poison ammo on a suppressed weapon, and your crossbow grenadier running pain sense to see poison hunters in dark sight, and further narrow down the enemy's position. There's plenty of advanced synergistic builds like this, but this one in particular combines the tools of Hunt with real-life fire maneuver small unit tactics. It's lonely at the top. Very few reach true expertise in any given field. There are two hallmarks of an expert, though. One is their knowledge of a topic is essentially complete, or as complete as human knowledge on the given topic or subject currently allows. Second is their intuition. They've experienced so many situations and learned to section problems off into subclasses of decisions that have a high likelihood of being the best response, even if there is no right and defined answer necessarily. These people have internalized so much knowledge and offloaded so much bandwidth to the subconscious that on a cognitive level, they're likely playing a completely different game from their opponent. They're not only operating at a blazing pace because of this, their likelihood of making mistakes is far lower also. I can't rightly put a video of me playing Street Fighter for this one. Not sure that I can for any of the others, but definitely not this one. So I'll put Evo Moment 37 instead. If you're a Street Fighter fan, you're probably well aware of this moment. I'll do a quick explanation of what EVO is and why this is one of the best visualizations of an expert showing how impossibly capable he is. EVO is a fighting game tournament which was founded in 2002 and is still going strong today. This particular match though was from 2004 and between Justin Wong and Daigo Umehara, playing Street Fighter Third Strike. Justin is playing Chun-Li and Daigo is playing Ken. Justin is solidly in the lead with Daigo only being one hit away from defeat. In some fighting games, there's something called chip damage, where even if you block an attack, it still does a small amount of damage. In Third Strike, regular attacks don't typically do chip damage, but special attacks do. So Justin makes what was logically the best move and inputs his special with Chun-Li when Daigo is in a position where he can't really avoid the attack. This special is a 15-hit combo with fast follow-up hits and an air attack. This should have been game over for Daigo, but Third Strike has a parry feature. The way it works is, if you tap towards your opponent at just the right time, when their attack lands, it'll parry the hit and do no damage to you. It also gives you a frame advantage over a regular block, but that's not important for this example. The parry window though is 10 frames and the game runs at 60 frames per second, so converted to time, 10 frames is about 166 milliseconds. The average human reaction time is around 200 to 250 milliseconds, with the fastest ever recorded in a controlled environment being around 120 milliseconds. Keep in mind this is for visual stimuli with a motor response attached. Your brain is reacting in around 120 milliseconds, but it takes an additional 80 milliseconds for the signal to be sent to your hands, and then for them to move. This forward tap input has to be entered predictively though, as the 10 parry frames have to overlap with the active frames of your opponent's attack. So what's happening here is that Daigo is basically making 15 consecutive predictions that border on superhuman reaction speed combined with perfect timing. Then lands and hit confirms into his own super that wins the round. It's absolutely nuts and stands as the greatest moment in fighting game history for very good reason. I've been using Hunt as my other example, but expertise in that game isn't easy to convey visually. You'd have to obviously be very accurate with landing your shots, including using sound to get cues and kills through walls on enemies that you can't really see. Knowing all the traits, weapons, monsters, and environmental properties and their nuances would also be a must. I think where an expert arises in a game like this, though, would be understanding the ebb and flow of combat and knowing when to push and apply pressure with aggression and when to back off. What would go hand in hand with this would be someone capable of building up their partner or two team members to be able to do the same thing and fluidly execute actual tactics in real time against opposing teams. I have an idea for a video on immediate action drills and the conditioned response that I plan on making in the future that'll tie heavily into this. What also makes this hard to measure is how many playstyles there are in Hunt. A solo who hides in a bush for 30 minutes to get a solid headshot might extract right after doing so and have an incredible KD ratio, but not be that capable in an outright firefight. An expert would be someone who could deal with a myriad of situations well and ideally complete the objective of the game, which is to get out with the bounties. So let me know in the comments if you have a good example or if there's a particular streamer you might consider to have expertise in Hunt, as I don't really watch any of the Hunt streamers. Maybe someone's done this already, but I couldn't find it if they had. I've taken the Dreyfus learning method and overlaid it with the Dunning-Kruger effect using my advanced MS Paint technology that I stole from the FBI. I think this pretty accurately shows the correspondence between these concepts. I feel like the fall in confidence is steeper in a competitive environment because you can definitely be put in your place much quicker and realize exactly how low you are on the pecking order. Team games where you can shift blame doesn't allow this to happen as quickly though. Outside of games, people tend to overestimate their abilities in highly complex or difficult topics where they're unlikely to actually be tested, such as perceived fighting ability or politics, where a strong opinion generally has to be tested by the person holding said opinion by actually stepping into the literal or figurative ring. That's all I've got for today's video. Thank you so much for checking this out if you made it this far in. I wanted to drop like 4 or 5 videos at once so I'd have a more substantial amount of content on the channel, but I'm approaching a month since my last proper upload and really wanted to get something out. As I get in the rhythm of doing this though, I'm going to shoot for 1 video a week, and I'll also be branching into reviews of older games and some previews of upcoming ones that I'm excited for. I plan on adding a tactical twist to these to stand out from the massive number of other reviewers out there. So anyways guys, thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch this. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, a dislike if not, and a comment if you're feeling generous. As always, stay sharp.